In 2018, 28-year-old Sarah Burton vanished on a quiet Joplin street. Dropped off just after midnight, she never made it home. Tonight, Ozarks Crime Watch retraces the search, the suspects, and the secrets that still haunt this city. And welcome to Ozarks Crime Watch. My name is Josh Shackles, and today we are investigating the disappearance of Sarah Burton. This is a case that I've followed from the very beginning, and there's a lot to talk about today. So let's go ahead and introduce our investigators.
Hey y'all, Sarah Moore here, back at it with the Ozarks Crime Watch crew. We finally made it to episode 10, and I couldn't be more excited. Tonight we're taking on a case that's been on a lot of people's minds, and I know we're all ready to break it down.
Hey everyone, Whitney here. Each week we uncover cases that leave behind more questions than answers, and this week's case is no different. I can't wait to dive into this case with the team.
Hey, it's Raina. So excited to be at our season finale for our very first introductory season of the show. Can't wait to see what we've got going on for tonight's case.
Welcome to Ozarks Crime Watch. I'm Sally, one of your hosts, and someone who grew up right here in the Ozarks. For me, these stories are more than cases. They're really close to home. This is our season finale, and tonight we honor Sarah Burton, keeping her memory alive and continuing the search for truth and closure for her family and loved ones. Thank you for being with us on this journey.
Hey guys, Joe here, back for another episode of Ozarks Crime Watch. I'm really excited to talk about this case. I've been following it since practically day one. I've spent a lot of time researching it and really interested in hearing what the team has to say.
Hey everybody, it's Connor. Excited to do this season finale tonight and learn and kind of break down this Sarah case.
And of course, my name is Josh Shackles. I'm a local historian and one of our investigators here at Ozarks Crime Watch. As a couple people mentioned, this is our season finale, our 10th episode. So we're so excited that you guys have decided to come along on this journey with us. If you missed any of our episodes, you can find them on our YouTube channel, or you can follow us on social media. That's some of the best ways to make sure you get the most up-to-date content. All right, so there's a lot to this case. Let's dig right into the case file.
The case file. Sarah Elizabeth Burton was born on February 22, 1990, in Joplin, Missouri. She was bright, charismatic, and full of potential. From an early age, she showed signs of academic promise and personal charm. Teachers placed her in gifted programs, and by high school, she was not only excelling in her classes, but also making her mark as a cheerleader at Joplin High. To those who knew her then, Sarah was destined for something greater, a young woman full of ambition and possibility. But as is too often the case, life introduced obstacles she wasn't prepared to navigate. Beneath the surface of her outward success, Sarah began a long and difficult struggle with substance abuse that would eventually derail her future and place her on a path that led to tragedy. After high school, Sarah's life slowly began to unravel. Recreational drug use turned into something darker and more consuming. Methamphetamine entered her life, and before long, it became the center of it. Her addiction eventually led to run-ins with the law, including a conviction in 2010 that landed her in prison. Her time behind bars didn't define her, but it certainly changed her. When she was released, she returned to Joplin with new determination and an even deeper love for the two young boys she was now raising. Sarah's children became her reason to fight. They were her tether to a life she wanted to rebuild. Despite relapses and the overwhelming weight of addiction, she continued trying to turn things around. By 2018, Sarah was once again living with her parents in Joplin. She had suffered another relapse, but this time, there was real momentum behind her recovery. Her family had been working tirelessly to secure her a place in a residential treatment program. Charges were pending against her, including drug possession, identity theft, and vehicle theft, but she hadn't missed a single court date. Her attorney had expressed hope that some of the charges might be dropped or reduced. Sarah, for the first time in a long time, believed that a better life was within reach. That belief would be tested on July 16, 2018. Sarah had been staying with a friend that evening, not far from her parents' house. She no longer had a car of her own. 5 days earlier, she had been in a car accident in Pittsburgh, Kansas, which had totaled the used SUV her father had bought for her. With her mobility limited, she depended on friends to get around. That night, sometime after midnight, a friend offered to drive her back home. He dropped her off near the intersection of 10th Street and Rex Avenue, a neighborhood she knew well. It was just a short walk to her parents' home, but Sarah never made it. She left behind her purse. She left behind one of her shoes. Both items were found in the car that dropped her off, which, to many, suggested she fully intended to return quickly. But that never happened. She vanished into the night, and by the following day, her family began to sense that something was wrong. At first, there was confusion, not panic. Sarah had occasionally gone off the grid for short periods, especially during difficult times. But by July 20th, after 4 days without a single word, her mother, Stephanie, reported her missing. That phone call marked the beginning of a search that continues to this day. Joplin police launched a missing person investigation, starting with those closest to Sarah and retracing her steps from the night she disappeared. Interviews were conducted, locations were checked, flyers were posted around town, and Sarah's face began appearing on social media pages and local news segments. In the early days, police believed Sarah had been last seen near 10th and Rex, the spot where she had been dropped off. That was the starting point for early search efforts. But in September 2018, a new tip changed everything. Through follow-up interviews and a more detailed timeline, authorities learned that Sarah had actually been seen later that morning at a residence on North Pearl Avenue in Northwest Joplin. This was a turning point in the investigation. It meant Sarah had indeed made it somewhere after being dropped off and that someone had seen her alive, perhaps only hours before she disappeared for good. The house on North Pearl Avenue became the primary focus. Police obtained a search warrant and combed through the property in December 2018, nearly 5 months after her disappearance. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Investigators examined the basement, yard, and even adjacent vacant lots. Despite the thorough search, no human remains were found. No physical evidence emerged to confirm what might have happened to Sarah inside or near that home, but law enforcement believed they were getting closer. Just 2 days later, the investigation shifted to Pittsburgh, Kansas, where police executed another search, this time at a rural property tied to someone Sarah may have known. The operation was carried out quietly. Authorities combed through a residence, outbuildings, and surrounding land. This property was searched more than once, indicating that law enforcement believed there was more than a coincidental connection. Still, no arrest ever followed. Whatever suspicions investigators had, they were either unprovable or unsubstantiated by the evidence at hand. In April 2019, nearly 9 months after Sarah vanished, a significant development jolted the case back into the headlines. A narcotic search warrant had been issued for a rural property on Crane Drive in Newton County, Missouri, just south of Joplin. What began as a drug bust quickly shifted into something more significant. Police reported that during the search, they discovered evidence that connected the location to the ongoing investigation into Sarah Burton's disappearance. The property, previously linked to criminal activity and believed to be frequented by known associates of Sarah, became the center of a massive operation. The Joplin Police Department, the Newton County Sheriff's Office, the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and the FBI worked together to search the site. They explored every inch of the house and the surrounding land. A pond on the property was drained, and dive teams were deployed to search for submerged evidence. Items were removed from the residence, and samples were collected for forensic analysis. Authorities were tight-lipped about what exactly they had found, but their actions spoke volumes. They described the site as a potential crime scene and sent the recovered materials to FBI labs for testing. Media coverage swelled. The people of Joplin watched closely, hoping for a resolution. But nobody was found. No one was arrested. And while law enforcement hinted at progress, they shared no details with the public. It was a familiar and frustrating pattern, one that had repeated itself multiple times throughout the investigation. On May 29, 2019, the FBI Kansas City Division formally announced a reward of up to $5,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for Sarah's disappearance. Her profile was added to the FBI's Missing Persons Registry, and the resources and reach of federal law enforcement now backed her case. The reward offer was shared widely across social media, prompting a fresh round of tips and speculation. Investigators hoped the money would encourage someone to come forward. But as the summer wore on, no breakthrough emerged. July 16, 2019, marked 1 year since Sarah was last seen. Her family organized a candlelight vigil at Mercy Park in Joplin to honor her memory and renew public attention. Dozens attended. They held photos of Sarah, lit candles, and whispered prayers into the dusk. Stephanie Burton gave a short but powerful statement to the press, thanking the community for standing by them and begging anyone with information to come forward. The pain in her voice was unmistakable. Her daughter had been missing for an entire year, and they were still no closer to knowing why. In August 2019, another search was conducted, this time near 10th and Rex, the original drop-off point. Volunteers from a local search and rescue group joined law enforcement in combing through a vacant lot and nearby brush. Again, no new evidence was found. The soil yielded no secrets. The silence remained. Sarah's case was no longer just a missing person investigation. It had become a haunting mystery that encapsulated the community's heartbreak. There were so many things about her disappearance that didn't make sense. Her plans to enter treatment, her love for her children, her willingness to face her legal troubles. All signs pointed to someone who had not given up and who had every intention of rebuilding her life. By the end of 2019, more than 150 leads had been investigated. Police had followed tips across Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Several persons of interest had been identified, and multiple properties had been searched with forensic teams and cadaver dogs. Yet the central questions remained unanswered. What happened to Sarah Burton in the early morning hours of July 17, 2018, and who was responsible? The theory that Sarah had voluntarily disappeared was no longer taken seriously. Law enforcement, her family, and the community at large agreed that something terrible had happened to her. Whether she had been murdered or held against her will, whether her death had been intentional or accidental, no one could say. But the absence of evidence only deepened the fear that whatever had happened had been carefully concealed. As the second year of the investigation approached, Sarah's name became something more than just a headline. She became a symbol for missing women, for overlooked victims, for families who endure without answers. Her story continued to circulate online, in actual crime forums, local media, and awareness campaigns. Her family continued to speak out, to fight for her memory, and to refuse the idea that her disappearance would become just another cold case. Even as media coverage slowed, the investigation itself did not. The Joplin Police Department kept Sarah's case open and active. Detectives continued to follow up on tips, many of which came through quietly, some anonymous, some secondhand, and others based purely on rumor. Some tips pointed to specific people in the community known to associate with criminal elements, while others named obscure properties in rural areas of Jasper and Newton counties. However, time after time, the tips either failed to produce actionable leads or led to previously searched locations. The evidence was never stacked high enough to justify an arrest. Law enforcement kept reviewing the case file, hoping that new eyes or new science might reveal what had been missed. The Joplin Police Department remained consistent in their message. The case was not cold. Officers continued to work it as an active investigation. They had never stopped chasing down tips, and they reiterated the reward, first issued by the FBI in 2019, was still in place. That reward, originally $5,000, was doubled in 2024 to $10,000. It was an effort to stir the conscience of someone who might be holding on to a secret. Investigators were clear. The money was not for speculation. It was for credible information that could lead to arrest and conviction. That word choice, conviction, reflected what authorities had believed for years. Sarah hadn't left on her own. She had been harmed, likely murdered, and someone was responsible. By 2025, Sarah Burton had been missing for more than 6.5 years. Her name had become more than a mystery. It had become a symbol of how addiction can render people vulnerable, a symbol of how women on the edge of recovery are often left unprotected, a symbol of how systems can fail and how silence can keep killers safe. But most of all, she remained a daughter, a mother, and a sister, a woman who had been trying to change her life when someone stole her future. As of this video, the $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for Sarah's disappearance remains unclaimed. The Joplin Police Department and the FBI urge anyone with information to come forward. Tips can be submitted anonymously, and law enforcement continues to stress that no detail is too small. They are still working on the case, still following up on leads, and still waiting for the break that could bring Sarah home. Her story is not just about what happened to her. It's also about what has not happened. No confession, no charges, no grave. Only the silence of those who know and the determination of those who keep asking. Sarah Burton was last seen on July 17, 2018, in Joplin, Missouri. She was 28 years old. She stood 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighed approximately 160 pounds, and had light brown hair and blue eyes. She left behind a family who loves her, 2 young sons who still ask about her, and a city that cannot forget her name. If you know anything at all about what happened that night, her family still waits to hear from you. Because somewhere in Joplin, or maybe not far from it, someone knows the truth, and it is time to speak.
First thoughts.
So, I remember when this was first announced that she was missing, and I saw her picture on Facebook, and I thought this was just another runaway or, person that was just misplaced. We would probably find her within a few days. We see that quite often, and we don't have a lot of missing people from Joplin. We have Tracy Pickett, who we covered at the beginning, and really not a lot since then. So to have an actual missing person didn't seem like what we were probably dealing with. And I probably overlooked things right away that maybe I would have paid more attention to if I would have known that she would not appear quickly.
For me, it's the fact that her purse and a shoe was left behind. Why was a shoe left behind? Was she pulled out of the car? I mean, that's just random to me. So
I believe that the reason that the extra shoe is that before the stop at 10th and Rex, they'd gone to Payless Shoes, where she had one shoe that was missing, and so she got another pair that was the same so that she could have the missing shoe, but it left an extra shoe. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's the case or not.
That is one of the things that was said. It hasn't been said by very many people, but it was put out there. I know my initial reaction was a lot like Josh's. I didn't really have I kind of thought the same thing, that it's someone that probably got, misplaced, so to speak, or, just was around and hadn't checked in or something. But within a few months, I got pretty heavily involved into it. But my initial reaction was kind of the same. It's just someone that it's going to show back up pretty soon, probably.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this, and I didn't really think much of it. My wife is a lot more, in tune with that type of stuff, so she was real worried about it. Sex trafficking happens to be pretty big around this area, so she our thought was essentially she might have probably just been, picked up and put into sex trafficking. But I didn't really pay much attention to it back then. I think over the last 5 years, I've started to pay way more attention to it and learning a lot more. Yeah.
The sex trafficking was a rumor that got spread around quite a bit, yeah.
Sure.
So I was living in Texas at the time, and I don't know Sarah or a lot of people that knew her, but I remember hearing about it when I was living down there and thinking that was kind of interesting. It seemed to be something that a lot of people were talking about, so I felt like maybe there's something to this. But then at the same time, there was a little bit of a delay from when she was last seen to when she was reported missing, so that also made me wonder, is this, someone stepped away, maybe they've stepped away before, hence the delay. I also think that, I would waffle back and forth and say, well, if it's getting this much attention, it must be a big deal, because how many people go missing every day and they don't get any media attention? I feel like there's a lot involved, a lot of requirements that have to be met before the news media will cover cases like this. So was it something that was, going to be a big deal, or was it maybe something that just got blown out of proportion? So, not being here and seeing the boots on the ground kind of makes it difficult, but I remember hearing about it when I was there and thinking, the news travels wide and fast.
Theory time.
So I think I've heard just about every possible theory imaginable with this case. We've heard rumors, legends, pieces of stories, something that some person heard from a friend of a friend. It was a threat. It was a this, it was a that. I think we've heard it all. In the time that we've been recording this, we've received several tips and information from people that have, or at least in their opinion, have direct evidence in this case.
I know I'm an admin on a Facebook group called We Will Find Sarah Burton, and it's been going for several years. And I used to, well, I still do admin a page called Joplin Crime Watch. It's not 2.0. It's not that active, but while Sarah, during the early years of Sarah missing, it was active, and I posted a lot about her on there. So through the comments, through Facebook messages on both the Crime Watch page and the Facebook group, there has been a lot of information that's been shared, and again, it's just information, but something that is posted from time to time by different people is the same thing, and it is everybody knows who did it. That has been a common theme through everything I've investigated in the last 5 years or so, is that, well, people know who did it, they're just afraid. And so knowing who did it and be able to prove who did it's one thing. I mean, I have my own theories on that I'm going to keep to myself, but I will say this, somebody out there has some information that is crucial, and it may be that bit of information that the Joplin police need to tie some pieces together.
I think the thing with all of the theories is that we've heard just about anything and everything, but none of it would surprise me. Like, it's hard to know what to believe because every situation that's presented, unfortunately, could very easily be exactly what's happened.
I know in the very hours of taped interviews I've listened to and the volume of messages I've read that have been screenshot and sent to me, what you do start to see is a pattern throughout, and if you start to see the same story more frequently and same names come out more frequently, those are what I kind of look at as a pattern that emerges from all the rumors and the information and misinformation. It's not necessarily solving the case, but it is, noticing those types of things as you analyze the info.
In talking about theories, Joe and I actually had a theory one time that a house around 3rd and Connor may have been involved. And we actually had the opportunity to enter the house to do plumbing work where we could examine what the basement of that house looked like and ultimately look for clues. We weren't able to resolve the plumbing problem, and it had to go on to other professionals.
Yeah.
That's not my line of work.
They wanted somebody that was bonded and licensed, and we realized we weren't. About when we were wrapping up, they needed a new sump pump, by the way. But there were some things in that basement. There was paint on the floor of a color that matches the background of a photo I've seen from time to time that could or could not be linked to this case. And so there was a few things, and based on some other information from people that lived there, and based on the fact that it was also known as a honky shooting gallery. Honky as in Joplin Honkies, a local group. They were known to frequent this place, and it was what they call a shooting gallery. You can look that up if you need to. And so there's a lot of links to it for a place where she may have been at one time.
You know, when we hear theories, the one thing that is really consistent is that almost all of the theories involve the Joplin Honkies.
That's correct.
Now,
Does,
that's not
Again,
that's not a group that really keeps its membership records on file anywhere, and so it's hard to know who exactly is a member and how much of that is hearsay and
Right.
talk.
But it is part of the rumor mill, and is one of those things that comes up frequently. And I think it comes up frequently because a lot of names come up, and these names just happen to be also associated with the honkies, so naturally they're going to be mentioned from time to time.
what are your thoughts on if it was a planned crime or crime of opportunity? Any thoughts, anyone?
Personally, I think that I don't, again, based on just a lot of stuff I've researched, I personally don't think that it was that anybody planned to kill Sarah.
I agree.
I think that there was a situation and she was going to be, what they say, roughed up for a reason, and it got out of hand and got out of control. That's what I believe.
I think it was loosely planned. I don't know how one goes about planning such a thing exactly, but I would imagine there had to be some sort of forethought involved, and I think if the honkies were involved, there is a history of publicly available news articles that outlined other crimes that have been committed by them that did involve an apparent significant amount of planning. And I just don't know if this fits into that. So maybe there was an issue that needed to be addressed, and maybe this is what should happen. And
Did they
then
hold her
There was some
accountable?
planning. I believe there was some planning to get her there, to lure her there, for one thing. And once she was there, I believe some of that planning that you're not really talking about, but that has occurred before, and we're talking about honkies that have been arrested for having torture devices to use on a person. Okay, so, and not only that, not just arrested, but found guilty and is currently serving time in federal
Correct.
prison.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is a thing, that is something that comes up frequently in a lot of honky investigations.
They also were convicted of taking pictures with a corpse.
Exactly.
What a
I
fun
mean,
group.
Does everyone here believe that she's no longer alive?
yeah.
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 It's
I
very
don't.
likely.
I hate to say it, but I
Sadly.
don't believe Sarah's alive either.
You know, in the beginning, I really did have a theory that maybe she was like, hey, I don't want to deal with the court problems that are coming up. You know, I don't want to think about going back to prison again. And early on, that's really what I thought was happening in
Right.
this case, that she probably just dipped out. But as more time has gone by, her face has been all over the United States. I don't think that that's the case
There
anymore.
was one little rumor that was going around that was kind of interesting, is that, and I have the names of the people involved, but there was one rumor that said that Sarah was hiding out in Carterville for a couple of days before she came to Joplin, and then ultimately disappeared. That was an odd one, but that would kind of go along with what you were talking about a little bit, and having to face. There was something she wasn't wanting to face, and that was what was involved with her disappearance, I believe.
Do you think that, there was something that had to do or happened the night that her car was totaled that fit in to, any of this, or that was just kind of a thing that happened along the way? Misfortune.
I certainly
Yeah.
wondered that, and I do wonder if the police recovered the vehicle, if they were able to obtain any evidence. Maybe that's why they searched the property in Kansas, because it was there.
She had gone over to Kansas a few days prior to missing. She had actually gone to the casino, I believe, and on the way home, she lost control of her car for whatever reason and totaled it, and it got impounded. And she just never got it out. So I don't know, it still could be in that impound for all I know. But I don't personally think it had anything to do with any of this. I think her being at the casino and then her suddenly needing, according to some of the stories out there, a significant amount of money. There could be a tie-in with that. I don't know. I have no idea, but there is that.
Close to home.
This feels really close to home because it literally happened in our backyards. There are not very many people that go missing in Joplin, Missouri. And I think that's why I'm so stuck on this case. Because this could have been anyone. If this hadn't happened, she could be sitting here at this table with us today recording this podcast. But instead, we don't know what happened to her. And that just breaks my heart.
I think for me, it's a lot of that, and just as I've said before, being so invested in this case for as many years as I have, that I am at the point now when I see a picture of Sarah, I feel like I knew her.
Yeah, same. I feel like I knew her. I didn't, but...
And I think that what makes it close to home to me is I believe it's going to be solved. I believe that through all of these investigations and these new findings throughout the years, and new places and people that they've talked to, I believe that the police have put the puzzle together pretty much. I believe that at some point, I believe they probably have somebody that they suspect. And I think that that's important to think about, because that means there's somebody out there that can fit that puzzle together and get this person off the street, or persons that were involved with Sarah's disappearance.
Exactly.
And it's not just some person. It's someone that is a friend of someone sitting at this table.
I believe multiple people know exactly what happened, who did it. It's just a matter of someone speaking up.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's close to home because Sarah's kids have been missing their mom for 7 years now. They're getting they're in elementary school now. One of them was just a toddler when she went missing. And they need answers. They deserve answers. Stephanie Burton, Sarah's mother, Sarah's sister, her father, Ron, her whole family deserve closure. And I believe that, I'm just going to say this every chance I get, somebody out there listening holds the answer.
That's right.
This is the case that everybody has an opinion on. The entire community is engaged. Everybody has a thought, has something to say, has a connection to the case. So I think that community interest and engagement is really high, which is great as far as getting the case solved. But someone just needs to speak up and say something.
Do you think that there is a fear that maybe it goes beyond just the honkies and Joplin area of the people who are involved in it? Because, $5,000 to a lot of people around here is a considerable amount of money that could really help them out.
Right.
To stay quiet, there may be a bigger picture to look at beyond just the Joplin area.
Definitely.
Something to consider. I think that Sarah has kind of become a symbol of, hey, the boogeyman is coming for you if you don't follow what we say. And a lot of people in the criminal world are kind of using that of, ha ha ha, don't end up like Sarah.
Yeah,
But we're gonna find her.
I'm sure the people that know have either been pressured or just afraid. But speaking up is what's going to get these guys off the street. I can tell you right now, I have a list of over 25 names of people that have been rumored to be involved with this case. And I'm not afraid to say that people have talked. They're just not talking to the right people.
Right.
And
If you're listening to this podcast and you're responsible, we got your name. We know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's best to just go ahead and turn yourself in, or if you know something about this case, call the Joplin Police Department at 417-623-3131.
How much longer do you want to let this be on your conscience?
Yeah.
Good point.
I mean, I can't imagine all these years it's been pleasant for you.
Well,
So,
everybody's bill comes due.
yeah.
And I'd love for local media to revisit the case too.
I'd like to know why it took 4 days for them to report Sarah missing to the police. And I'd like to know who had her cell phone.
No,
As a
and
matter of fact, I know who had her cell phone. I just wish they would speak up.
I think when outside sometimes we see a person who is involved in drugs or something illicit, or sometimes something just like a DWI, and then all of a sudden every good that person has done just goes away immediately. And I think it's a thing we talk about, that we want community and that we love people and we're here to help. Well, that means sometimes when people do things that show our humanity and break a little bit, we need to be able to catch people a little bit more. I think if we started showing a bit more compassion to people who stumble and fall, instead of being like, well, it's their choice, they knew, they should have not done that drug.
We have in a lot of ways, our police force is different than when Sarah disappeared. We had a different chief that was invested in finding her, our former chief of police. He was really dedicated to that. But we have a different set of circumstances now. And I think in the beginning, a lot of people focused on some of the struggles that Sarah had in her life, those things that she was working on fixing. And I think sometimes people just chalked it up to another druggie missing. And that's a terrible way to begin an investigation, and it's a terrible way to begin the community to look at something. And I think it's more important to focus on Sarah as a human being that is gone, and we need to get the answers.
Yeah, everyone is important, no matter what we do in this life. Like we all came, I think Connor had said it before, we all have parents, and there has been love in our life at some point. So I think maybe whoever's out there and the people who do know, just to return to that feeling of love and think about, what if you had lost the most precious thing in your life, your child or your mother or a friend? Like, what would you feel like every night just not knowing? I mean, and you can be anonymous, just say something so the family can go to bed and at least know what happened.
Final thoughts.
Rephrase.
Final thoughts.
So, my final thought is really just that this is a really sad case.
Right.
I do believe that we will have a break in this case, and that Sarah will be found and the people responsible brought to justice.
Agreed.
And someone listening to this podcast may have the answer. So please, again, reach out to the Joplin Police Department, 417-623-3131. Any detail that you may know, anything about Sarah during that time. It could be the smallest thing that lets them open the door to solve this case. So if you are a person that knew Sarah or knew Sarah during that time, even if you've shared your story in the past, I would urge you to reach out to the Joplin Police Department and tell it again.
My final thoughts are that, we've talked a lot about some theories tonight. We've talked about rumors. I've talked about how much time I've put into it. Josh has put the same amount of time into this case. And the thing is that we are not the Joplin Police Department. We are not the FBI. So the investigations they are doing are a lot more in depth. They have information that we probably don't, that I'm sure they have information we don't have. And I believe that some of the information that they do have is the same information that we have. And that it takes just like Josh said, where I'm going to drive this home, it just takes one little piece to tie this all together. So somebody's listening that knows, get a hold of the police department.
Do you guys feel like if the reward was increased that it may help somebody come forward, or do you think that at this point, like, money isn't really a motivator?
I don't think money's going to be a motivator. And I mean, if $10,000 isn't going to do it, I think there's just a lot more at stake for people than you can put a price on.
I think it's fear of retaliation.
Yeah, if the Joplin honkies are involved in this, or any other organized crime group or disorganized crime group in the honkies case, if they are involved in this, then if you turn one of them in, you've got the rest of them to deal with.
Right.
And people are afraid of that. I'm sure that someone out there that knows may have, children that they're trying to protect and other family members. And so it's a fear-based silence, I believe.
But at the end of the day, people don't just disappear. Someone knows where she is. She's not gone forever. She's, I think, unable to be located at the moment until someone does the right thing and opens their mouth.
Are there ways to, I guess, lessen the fear within people to make it a safe space to come forward?
My hope is that whoever these scumbags are responsible, one of them is going to do something and end up in jail. And that's going to free someone to say something.
Right. It just takes a few people going to jail. I mean, there's been a few people go to jail recently that are probably either connected to this or have information about it. So they're already in jail. A lot of them that were around 7 years ago are in jail. And there's new ones out there. The Joplin honkies get new members all the time. Other gangs do too, whatever those gangs may be. And so there may be less of a reason to be in fear of retaliation.
As we're sitting here doing this podcast, we all have copies of her missing poster. She's absolutely beautiful. She's a daughter. She's a mom. And just something just to think about is for our listeners, just takeaways, is just to remember that she is a mom, she is a daughter, she has people who love her, that want answers, and we all want justice for her. So we hope that everything that we've shared today, that it will impact you in a big way.
We appreciate all of you tuning in to season 1 of Ozark Crime Watch. We'll be back in a few weeks when we get started with season 2, and I'm really excited because we're going to add a video element so that you guys can see what happens whenever we're recording. So make sure to like our Facebook page because that's where we'll share the live video, and of course follow us on YouTube because that's where we share all of the case files and the extra things. So till the next season, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.